Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present to you about the 2025 session and also look ahead to what's coming up on the horizon this interim. I'm Cameron Deal, the director of the League, and just finished my 17th legislative session representing you at the Capitol, and it's been an honor and a privilege to do so. There's plenty of people who are happy about the session being over, but nobody happier than my kids. For those of you who come to LPC regularly, you'll know, because you see this picture every year, that my kids make a paper chain to track each day of the legislative session until Dad comes home. And as you heard from the staff, we're up there from dawn until dusk. But it really is a team effort, and I want to thank President Walker. I want to thank the League officers, League Board of Directors, who you saw on stage earlier today, what we refer to as our extended family, which is all of the mayors and council members and city staff that join us regularly at the Capitol. The strength of the League at the Capitol really is you, the membership. And one of my favorite moments from this past legislative session was a day where we had multiple high-profile bills up in the same body, the House of Representatives. We'd sent action alerts the night before, and I was talking to a legislator that morning. I said, we sent action alerts on these bills, and her response was, I know, your city spoke up. And all of those bills ended up getting sidelined for that day because of the pushback that you provided to legislators, and all of those bills were able to get restarted and then negotiated to much better places. So we, in this recap, aren't going through all 279 bills that we were tracking. We've done that over the last few weeks. We actually just put on our website this week, it'll be in Friday Facts tomorrow, the legislative recap that goes through all those bills. We've done multiple webinars. We've been meeting with your city managers and your city attorneys and your clerks and your treasurers and your finance officers at different conferences around the state this spring to make sure you have the information you need about what happened during the legislative session. Well, again, I show this picture because once the session ended, we had promised our kids that we were going to go on a trip, and they wanted to go whale watching. So in light of whale watching, I have a question for you. Is anyone here a marine biologist? Any Seinfeld fans? Anyone? Okay. I'm no George Costanza, but we went whale watching. That is not a whale. That, at least I know, that's not a whale. My kids told me it was a mola mola. Well, for the first hour, that's all we saw was this mola mola. And for all you parents out there, you know, when your kids are excited about something, been looking forward to it for weeks, and then it doesn't happen right away, you as a parent start to get anxious. In my case, I started to get seasick because you'll notice my younger daughter couldn't quite see over the railing. So then I was up there holding her like this on the boat so she could see over the railing. Made me almost as nauseous as the legislative session does. But nevertheless, my wife and I just kept encouraging them to look to the horizon. What is coming on the horizon? It might be good, it might be bad, it might be birds, it might be a pirate ship. There were no pirate ships, this was San Diego. But nevertheless, what is out there on the horizon? And the good news is we finally spotted something. Does anybody know what this is? Okay, my daughters were super excited. They asked the guide on the boat, and the guide said, that's whale poop. Well, my daughters were very excited because where there's whale poop, there are whales, and ultimately we were able to see whales, and they were thrilled and made the session almost worth it. So as we were talking to them, though, about this concept of looking out to the horizon, we want to talk to you now about what's on the horizon, because even though the legislative session ends, the legislative process never ends. And we were able to have a nice trip over spring break for this. Our next spring break trip, or some trip, will probably be to go see the night sky somewhere, because they're also very interested in astronomy and want to see the asteroid belt and planets and stars. And that's all next. But let's talk about the horizon in the water right now and what is coming. What is coming in the policy space in the next few months? The legislative session just ended last month. We are 277 days away from the 2026 legislative session. Yet, the docket is full. In fact, a week and a half after the session ended, I was in a meeting that went 4.5 hours with state leaders and business leaders, laying the foundation for key policy issues for 2026, a week and a half later. So it is a year-round effort. So let's talk about what's on the horizon. First, there are some critical deadlines coming for you. One is related to ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. From a few years ago, every city, town, and village in the United States received a direct allocation from ARPA, and you have a deadline to report by April 30th. Every city and town has that April 30th deadline. Well, interestingly, we learned a few weeks ago from the Treasury Department that there were 37 cities and towns that had actually missed the December deadline. And so we partnered with our local administrative advisor program, and we're able to get a hold of those 37 communities which risked having to refund $5.3 million back to the federal government. And between our local administrative advisors and league staff, including McKenna Marchand and John Park, our local administrative advisor staff, we were able to preserve 83% of that money. You don't want to run the risk of having to recoup this money to the federal government. So recognize April 30th is the deadline for your ARPA reporting. Likewise, we will have materials for you today about key effective dates of legislation, of things that you need to do over the next few months, not just from the bills that passed this year, but from bills that have passed in recent years, to try to make it easier for you to go back to City Hall and say, let's make sure we're compliant with these requirements. I also want to thank McKenna and our local administrative advisor program, putting together this annual municipal calendar, again, to try to help you, give you a resource to know what are these key dates and what do you need to make sure you're doing on an annual basis. So that's on the horizon just in the next few weeks, because most bills go into effect in May. Well, when we talk about what big issues are coming, here comes the octopus. And one such issue, unsurprisingly, is housing. The Utah State Housing Plan is into phase 2. And I want to thank the dozens of cities that provided us feedback about phase 1. We've already provided that feedback to the governor's office, and the first few work groups are already underway of phase 2, and they have a statutory requirement to finish the recommendations of the state housing plan this calendar year, so by December. As such, it's going to be a very busy interim in the housing space, as it has been for the last few years. And we know there's a lot of frustration out there, feeling like the state is constantly asking you to do X, Y, and Z, and yet we're still struggling with this housing affordability crisis. This is a crisis happening all over the country. But I also want to applaud state leaders because of the emphasis on partnership, not preemption. So these are just a couple of headlines from the past legislative session, what lawmakers did and didn't do. You'll see in the subheading, to quote, expect really difficult policy discussions this interim. And so as we've done in the past, we'll have a work group this summer that will be providing feedback to the league board and to league staff about how to navigate these different policy issues. And then, to the credit of state lawmakers, they embrace that message of partnership, not preemption, and that we're better when we're working together. And then our key principles around affordable home ownership, sustainable infrastructure, and quality of life. So we'll talk more about this issue in caucuses later today. Okay, next on the horizon, another big ticket item here. Here come the Dolphins. And this is the uncertainty that is happening in Washington, D.C., to tariff or not to tariff, and lots of other federal policies that will have impacts at City Hall. So right after the legislative session, we put together this document to share with the federal delegation so that they understood what the impact would be if Congress removed the tax-exempt status of municipal bonds. We did this research in partnership with Lewis Robertson and Birmingham and identified $18 billion worth of municipal bonds that we have issued here in the state of Utah in the last 5 years, and then what the fiscal impact would be on residents and on cities if we were to lose that tax-exempt status. And then we delivered that message to the whole delegation. That's me with Congressman Moore in Washington, D.C. And yes, those are old-school telephone booths behind me in the Longworth building. It's over 100 years old. There are no more payphones there, but people are usually sitting in there on their own smartphones. But that sort of data is what we try to provide at the League to help inform policymakers. Ultimately, there are a lot of difficult decisions that have to be made in Washington. The spending is unsustainable there and has been for a generation now. But we want to make sure they understand what the impacts are going to be on City Hall. Okay, next on the horizon, this interim will bring sea turtles and natural resources challenges, in particular around wildfire risk and water. Now, for those of you who live on the Wasatch Front, water is not nearly as scarce as it has been in recent years, but for those of you who live basically anywhere south, it's a different situation. Now, we are sacrificing our barbecue tonight. It's coming inside instead of out because of the weather change coming tonight, so hopefully the storm that arrives tonight in St. George will help. But as you can see, we've got a lot of water challenges. And tomorrow, Mayor Walker, the league president, will be on stage with Steve Waldrop, the governor's senior advisor on housing, to talk about housing, but also with Zach Renstrom from Washington County Water Conservancy District to talk about the tactics they're using here to mitigate the drought and how that could be helpful to city leaders and local government leaders around the state. This is the wildfire risk in the state of Utah. And we were all heartbroken by the devastation in Los Angeles. And we've already engaged in conversations with the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands at the state level to talk about potential changes to how we mitigate wildfire risk here in the state of Utah. So that's going to be another big ticket policy item this summer. Okay, now we're starting to get to the bigger fish, mammals, whatever, that are on the horizon. Operation Gigawatt and AI. Operation Gigawatt is part of Governor Cox's strategic plan for his second term. And Operation Gigawatt really is an acknowledgement that we need to expand our power capacity and our power supply. Nuclear power is going to be an enormous part of that equation. Likewise, part of the reason that you're seeing this emphasis is because Utah wants to be one of the AI leaders in the world. And a trade mission just returned from Canada to talk about what we need to do in Utah to be one of the AI capitals. Whether it's AI or just keeping up with growth, we need more power, we need more electricity. And so particularly for those of you who are cities that have your own municipal power departments, this is going to be a very critical issue to make sure you are engaged on through the league in the months to come. Okay, here comes the cute one, the seal. Public safety, one of the core functions of local government, public safety. Well, Justin and Carson did a great job outlining all of the bills that passed and were introduced during the session. Well, there were dozens of bills in the public safety space alone. Governor Cox, just 2 weeks ago, put together a task force to look at criminal justice policy in the state. And of course, us being local governments, we're the front lines of criminal justice. So this could be an important policy discussion over the course of the next few months. Okay, now here come the whales, right? This is what we've been waiting for. And the subject of my comments last year at this conference were about the Olympics. We didn't have them yet, but we were all cautiously optimistic that we would get them. And while we were talking about the Olympics, last year I told you about my old debate binder from junior high where we talked about the transportation needs for the 2002 Winter Olympics. Well, part of the transportation needs for the 2034 Winter Olympics, no joke, it's going to be air taxis. Has anybody used an air taxi? Anybody? Okay, well the answer to that question is going to change. And on stage tomorrow in the Mayor Walker Show, we'll have Adam Gardner, who's been an expert in this space. And air taxis are real, they're a thing, and they're coming to a city near you. And state law has actually authorized the creation of vertiports. True story, okay? So what does that mean for land use? What does that mean for transportation? We'll be working through that this interim. Those are just the big fish, and then there's more. This is the interim list that was just released earlier this week. So as you can see, things never really end when the session is over. It's a year-round session, which means our advocacy and our efforts also have to be year-round. We have to match that annual effort. Now, if you see items up here where you say, I want to make sure my city is involved, awesome. Because the next step here is how do we make sure that your city, regardless of size, has your voice heard throughout the interim and at the Capitol. And let me just give you a couple of examples of that. So at this conference 2 years ago, in our Rapid Growth Caucus, there was a lengthy discussion about how difficult it was for our quickly growing communities to keep up with the needs for parks and the needs for soccer fields and baseball fields and large-scale regional parks. We took that feedback to state leaders. We ran it through a couple of different task forces. And long story short, just a few months ago, we got a change to state rule that made local parks an eligible use for the outdoor recreation grant. There will be money awarded later this year through that grant program to help cities with regional parks. So that'll be the first time that's happened. That grant program will be going later this year, but that concept came from the caucus discussions that happened this afternoon. So thank you to the Rapid Growth Caucus a couple years ago for that conversation. Now we also recognize that for a lot of you, this may be your last major conference because this year is a municipal election year. And almost every mayor has to make the decision, do I do this again? 4 more years, or you're ready to be done, or your voters decide they want to go in a different direction. And then about half of our councils face that same dilemma this year. What's also interesting is that the legislature a couple of years ago actually changed their timing for filing, and now they file before the session. So that means before the 2026 session starts, we'll know who's running for re-election and who's not, which means they're going to start campaigning earlier than they have before. And this gets to Cassidy's point of the survival of the friendliest. This summer is a phenomenal opportunity for you as cities to build those relationships with legislators as they're making decisions about whether or not to run for re-election. So what can you do to prepare for what's on the horizon? Okay, we've given you a quick snapshot of what's to come. What you can do first, attend caucus today and give us feedback through there. And then I mentioned we do our spring training throughout the spring. We've been to a lot of conferences. We've been to a lot of conferences of mayors. Make sure we know when you're having events so that league staff can come join you. And I mentioned, the league board was up on stage earlier today, and the amount of time and effort that the board and the officers in particular put in on your behalf. We have board members all over the state. That's one of our requirements. And we have board members from big cities to small towns. So make sure when you're having regional events, your league board member knows and can inform us, and that we have that two-way dialogue. The second thing you can do is work on building your conflict competence. And Arthur Brooks was phenomenal this morning. He was tremendous. And we're working on this curriculum to help you navigate the challenge of conflict at City Hall. We'll have Professor Danya Ramori on stage tomorrow with Mayor Troy Walker, and she'll be doing a workshop, and we've contracted with her to help us build curriculum that's local government focused. And we did some survey work with you over the last few months, where we found that more than 95% of you said navigating conflict is a critical component of your job, but only about a third of you felt like you were equipped with the tools you needed to tackle those conflicts. And so the league board has prioritized that effort, and that's going to be part of our training resources in the months to come. Okay, third thing is attend the Legislative Policy Committee. By quick show of hands, how many of you attended an LPC either in person or online during the session? Okay, keep your hands up and just look around the room. That is awesome. That is awesome. So thank you for carving out the time to be there as elected officials and as mayors. Justin and Carson talked about how we use the slider results during the session. I'm just going to give you one quick illustration of that. The last Monday of the legislative session, Mayor Walker and Seth Parents, who's the representative from the City Management Association on the league board and is one of the league officers, they were there at the crack of dawn with me. We had a pretty feisty meeting with several key state leaders. We met with Governor Cox, and we met with Senate leadership, and we met with others, and then we met with the rest of the officers, with Councilmember Hinton and Councilmember Bradshaw, who you saw on stage today, as well as with Mayor Kafusi, our immediate past president for Provo. And so we had our strategy session prior to LPC, then we had LPC, and then after LPC, the league officers and league staff went through all of the slider results that afternoon from LPC. We organized all of them and then submitted them to legislators in the governor's office that night, so they could see, here's the direction our members want to go on these bills. And that's just one example of the amount of time that your officers and your board members put in on your behalf. And so I want to say thank you to them, and thank you for your contributions. Well, the Legislative Policy Committee meets year-round. And during the session, we averaged more than 300 people. And during the off-season, we will start up on May 21st, and that's also the first day of interims. So there'll be more details in Friday Facts. If you don't get Friday Facts, contact a league staffer. We will make sure that you receive Friday Facts. So what's another thing you could do? You heard Cassidy talk about survival of the friendliest. Well, what we want to challenge you to do between now and when we next meet in the fall in Salt Lake is we want to challenge you to engage in faces and places. Build relationships with your legislators by engaging them in your community. Have a face-to-face meeting with them. Now, a face-to-face meeting doesn't have to be you're sitting across the table talking shop. A face-to-face meeting with them could be inviting them to the 4th of July parade. It could be inviting them to your rodeo. It could be inviting them to a ribbon cutting. It could be inviting them to when you're opening up a new water tank. It could be doing a police ride-along. There are multiple things you can do to really help your legislator feel invested in your community, even if she or he lives in a neighboring city. So between now and then being the annual convention in a few months, we urge you to have face-to-face meetings so that you can continue building those relationships of trust. And then after the filing period, when you know who's running for office, we recognize that there'll be different people in office at City Hall come January. We'll need to do it again, and do it again, and do it again. On the places side, we've had some tremendous positive conversations with Governor Cox about the need to collaborate and the desire, the mutual desire to showcase the great things you are doing on the ground in cities around the state. So we want to showcase your places. Part of the governor's strategic plan for his second term is built here and focusing on people and places and prosperity. And he wants to showcase the places that you are creating for the quality of life of today's residents and tomorrow's residents. So that could be downtown revitalization in Vernal City. That could be phase 2 of Mill Creek Common in Mill Creek City. It could be any number of centers. It could be any number of new regional parks and facilities. But what you are doing to plan for the quality of life of today's and tomorrow's residents, we as a league, in partnership with your associations of governments, want to highlight, and Governor Cox wants to showcase them as well. So with that, I want to close by saying thank you to our league staff. You've met quite a few of them, either at the registration desk or on stage. Justin Lee and Molly Wheeler have been on stage here. Nick Jarvis is our COO. You saw Jared on stage along with Carson and Cassidy. Meg Ryan is our land use expert. Alexa was our new policy analyst. Megan Jacobs was one of the best interns we've ever had, and I say that as a former league intern. Megan was awesome for us this year. Roger, this was session number 48. Yeah, 48 legislative sessions for Roger, which is why I don't let him retire, because we need that institutional knowledge. Todd Godfrey answers a ton of questions from city leaders across the state. Angela Adam and Katie Harley are the two who really make this event happen, along with Molly and the rest of the team. And then our local administrative advisors, John Park and McKenna Marchant. Can we just give a round of applause to the league staff for their great contributions? And then last but not least, thank you to all of you. Thank you for your service in your communities. Thank you for making Utah the best place to work, live, and play. We have big challenges in front of us. As you can see on the horizon, there are a lot of big ticket items. We're going to be busy, but Utah has this secret sauce of collaboration, and that takes work. When I talk to my fellow state league directors around the country, it's amazing how many states really don't have that level of harmony. And it's not that we agree on everything. There is a lot of disagreement at the Capitol, but we managed to work through issues, we managed to collaborate, and we prioritize cooperation. And that's because of the work that you all do in this room at City Hall and with your residents. So I want to thank you for your contributions to our community. Thank you for your involvement in the league. Again, later tonight, the barbecue is going to be inside rather than outside because of the ongoing weather. And then we look forward to engaging with you in our caucus meetings later today. Thank you again for joining us in sunny St. George.